Story 1. The Bench That Bleeds. I never used to believe in haunted places. Ghost stories were just that, stories. That was until I came across the bench at the old bus stop on the corner of 18th and Mission in San Francisco. Now, I can't forget what I saw, and I don't think I ever will. It started about 6 months ago. I worked night shifts at a small diner a few blocks away. Every night I'd take the same route home, cutting through Mission Street to catch the 14 bus. The bus stop there had an old worn-out wooden bench, its paint peeling, a few names and initials carved into its surface. It looked like any other bench in the city until you got close. The first time I noticed it, I was just sitting there waiting for my bus. The streetlights flickered above, the distant hum of late-night traffic, the only sound filling the empty street. I shifted on the bench, and that's when I saw it. A dark red liquid seeping from underneath the wood, slow and viscous, like something bleeding from deep inside. I instinctively reached down to touch it. It was thick, sticky, and smelled faintly metallic. I jerked my hand away, wiping my fingers on my jeans, and stood up, peering underneath the bench. Nothing. No spilled drinks, no leaky pipes, just a growing, glistening stain spreading beneath the wood. My bus arrived, and I jumped on, glancing back one last time. The stain was already fading into the pavement as if it had never been there. I told myself I imagined it. Maybe someone spilled something earlier, and it took a while to dry. But the next night, it happened again. This time the stain was larger, and I could swear it pulsed, just slightly, as if it had a heartbeat of its own. The smell was stronger, too, iron-like, the way a cut finger smells when you suck on it. By the third night, I was obsessed. I asked some of the locals about the bench. Most just shrugged, but an old man who sold newspapers across the street narrowed his eyes and muttered, "You don't sit there, not if you know what's good for you." When I pressed him, he shook his head and refused to say more. So I started digging. Late nights at work turned into hours of researching, scrolling through old newspaper archives, and that's when I found it. The story of a missing woman named Evelyn Carter. In 1978, she had disappeared without a trace. Witnesses last saw her at that exact bus stop, waiting for the light bus. She was a waitress, much like me, working late nights. Some said she was supposed to meet someone that night. Others claimed she had been acting nervous in the days leading up to her disappearance. But the most disturbing detail, the night she vanished, a pool of blood was found under the bench. A lot of blood, but no body, no evidence, just the blood stain that wouldn't dry. I had to know more. I started staying longer after my shift, bringing a flashlight, watching the bench. The liquid always returned, like it was forcing itself to be seen. And then one night, I saw something I can't explain. It was past midnight, and the streets were empty. I stood across from the bus stop, waiting. The air was cold, my breath coming in small puffs. And then right before my eyes, the bench began to darken. The liquid oozed up from the wood, thick and black in the dim light. And then there was movement. A shape formed in the darkness, a shadow that wasn't cast by any light. It took the shape of a woman, head tilted, arms stretched out, as if waiting for something. My stomach twisted, and every instinct told me to run, but I couldn't. The shadow flickered, and then for a brief moment, I saw a face, hollow eyes, mouth twisted in a silent scream. I stumbled backward, and just like that, the figure was gone. The bench was dry, no liquid, no trace. I tried to put it out of my mind, but every time I passed that bus stop, I felt the weight of something watching. I even saw others noticing it, too. One night, I caught a woman staring at the bench, her eyes wide with the same fear I had felt. She told me she had seen someone sitting there, someone who wasn't really there. Determined to get answers, I found an old police detective, retired now, but one of the officers who had investigated Evelyn's case. When I mentioned the bench, his face went pale. "We never found her," he said, "but we found enough blood to know she didn't leave that spot alive. The thing is, we cleaned it, scrubbed it down, replaced the boards, but the stain, it always came back. The deeper I dug, the worse it got." I began dreaming of Evelyn, dreams where she stood at the bus stop, her body covered in deep wounds, her mouth moving, but no words coming out. Some nights, I would wake up gasping for breath, the faint scent of iron in the air. Then, the nightmares became real. I started waking up with scratches on my arms, deep welts as if someone had gripped me tightly. I felt pressure on my chest at night, like something was pushing me down. The final straw came when I saw her reflection in my bathroom mirror, standing behind me, her mouth moving soundlessly, her eyes pleading. I left the city a month later, unable to stay any longer, but I know it's still there. The bench, the stain, and Evelyn, waiting for a bus that will never come. Sometimes I check the news. People still talk about it. Some say the bench has been replaced again, but it doesn't matter. The blood always comes back, and late at night, when the streets are empty, some say they can still hear her whispering, waiting for someone to finally hear what she's been trying to say all these years. Story 2, The Last Passenger. I've been driving the M14 bus in New York City's late-night shift for nearly a decade. You see all kinds of things in this city. Drunks stumbling home, late-shift workers nodding off in their seats, couples fighting, people talking to themselves. I thought I had seen it all. That was until last winter, when I started seeing him. It was the dead of January, one of those nights where the cold cuts through your coat like a knife. The streets were mostly empty, except for the occasional cab or lone pedestrian. My route took me through the Lower East Side, weaving through the silent, glistening streets. It was around 2:45 a.m. when I pulled up to a stop near Avenue C. There was a man standing there, thin, tall, wearing an old hoodie pulled up over his head. He stood still, staring right at the bus as if waiting to board. I hit the brakes, opened the doors, and nothing. The man was gone. I blinked, leaned forward, looked up and down the sidewalk. No sign of him. Just empty pavement, wet from melted snow. Maybe I imagined it. Late shifts mess with your head sometimes. So I shrugged it off and kept driving. But then it happened again. 3 stops later, same thing, same guy. Standing at the curb, same hoodie, same stillness. I opened the doors, my breath fogging up in the cold, and once again, he wasn't there. Just gone. Like he had never been there at all. By the time I reached the end of my route, my hands were gripping the wheel tighter than usual. I kept telling myself it was exhaustion, a trick of the streetlights, maybe some kid messing around. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The next night I was dreading my shift. I drove the same route, keeping an eye on every stop, and sure enough, at exactly 2:45 a.m., there he was again. This time, I didn't stop. I slowed down just enough to get a good look at him. His hood was down now, and for the first time, I saw his face. Pale, hollow eyes, like he had been out in the cold for too long. Lips parted, as if he was trying to say something. I slammed my foot on the gas. I didn't sleep well after that. I kept thinking about that face, the way he looked right through me. So the next night, I decided to check the security footage. I sat in the depot's break room, rewinding through the previous night's drive. My hands were sweating, even though the room was freezing. I watched the stops, waiting for him to appear on screen, and then I saw it. The footage showed my bus pulling up to the stop. The doors opened, but there was no one there, no hooded man, nothing, just the empty street, just like I had seen. I felt sick. I kept digging, searching for an explanation, and then I found something that made my stomach drop. Almost exactly a year ago, on that same night, at that same time, there had been an accident. A young man had been running for the bus, waving it down, but the driver, someone else back then, hadn't seen him in time. He slipped on the ice, hit his head on the curb, and died instantly. The timestamp on the police report, 2:45 a.m. That's when the real nightmares began. I kept seeing him, not just at the bus stops, but in my rearview mirror. Sometimes, while driving through the empty streets, I'd glance up and see him sitting in the last row of the bus, his face pale, his hoodie still dripping wet from the snow. Every time I turned around, he was gone. One night, I heard footsteps. The bus was empty, yet I heard slow, deliberate steps moving down the aisle behind me. The overhead lights flickered as if someone was walking past them. My hands clenched the wheel, my breath coming out in short gasps. I refused to look in the mirror. I refused to acknowledge what was happening. But the steps grew closer, and then, in the silence, I heard it. A whisper, so soft, so close it felt like breath on my neck. "You left me." I slammed the brakes so hard the tires screeched against the wet pavement. The bus skidded to a stop, my heart pounding. The doors swung open on their own, creaking like old wood. Silence. I sat there, gripping the wheel, my knuckles white. The cold air from outside crept in, wrapping around me, and then just as suddenly, the doors shut again. The bus was empty, but I wasn't alone. The nightmares got worse after that. Shadows moving at the edge of my vision, whispers brushing against my ears in the dead of night. No matter how many times I switched routes, how many early shifts I picked up, he always found me. And every time, the message was the same. "You left me." One night, after an especially long shift, I found something in my locker at the depot. A wet footprint leading up to the door, stopping right in front of it. Inside, my uniform was soaked, as if it had been left out in the snow for hours. No one else had access to my locker. No one could explain it. The last time I saw him was the night I quit. I was driving my last route, feeling relief knowing this would all be over soon. But as I pulled up to my final stop, I saw him, standing in the middle of the street, directly in my path. His face was clearer now, his eyes more desperate. His lips moved, but no sound came out. He lifted a hand, pointing at me. The bus suddenly shut down. The lights flickered. The engine died. The doors wouldn't open, and the cold seeped in through the cracks. And then slowly the windows began to fog up, except for one spot. Right in front of me, a clear message written by an invisible hand. "Why didn't you stop?" I scrambled to turn the key to get the bus moving, but the wheel wouldn't budge. The air inside felt heavy, suffocating. I looked up into the rearview mirror, and he was sitting right behind me, his hollow eyes locked onto mine. I don't remember much after that. When I woke up, I was slumped over the wheel. The bus parked back at the depot. The engine was running. My supervisor was shaking me awake, saying I had missed check-in by an hour. I never went back. I left the city, moved upstate. But even now, when I take the subway home late at night, I see empty seats reflected in the train's windows. And sometimes, just sometimes, I swear I see him sitting there, staring back at me. Waiting. Story 3. The Bus That Never Came. I had been working the night shift at St. Luke's Hospital for 3 years. My routine was the same every night. I would clock out at exactly 2:30 a.m., walk to the bus stop on 9th Avenue, and wait for the M23 to take me home. It was never crowded at that hour, usually just a couple of other night workers or the occasional drunk, and the bus itself always arrived on time. But one night, the bus never came. The city was quiet, colder than usual for late October. The streetlights buzzed faintly, flickering in and out like they were struggling to stay awake. I checked my phone. 2:45 a.m., the M23 was never this late. I looked around, expecting to see another person waiting, but the street was empty. That's when I heard the engine. It rumbled low and deep, different from the modern buses I was used to. Headlights cut through the darkness as an old bus rolled toward the stop. It was black, sleek, and had an old-fashioned design. Not like the M23 at all. The metal body was dull with age, the windows dark and tinted. The doors creaked open, and I hesitated. Something about the bus felt off. But I was exhausted, my feet aching from a double shift, and the idea of waiting another 30 minutes in the cold was unbearable. So I stepped inside. The air smelled of dust and engine oil. The lighting inside was dim, casting long, eerie shadows across the floor. The passengers, at least a dozen of them, sat stiffly in their seats, their faces pale and expressionless. They were all dressed strangely, like they had stepped out of a black and white photograph. Old coats, fedoras, long dresses. As I moved down the aisle, I felt their eyes on me, not directly staring but watching from the corners of their eyes, their heads slightly turned in my direction. I gripped the cold metal pole and tried to steady my breathing. Maybe they were coming from some costume party. I took a seat near the middle. The bus groaned as it moved forward. Something about the motion felt wrong. The city outside looked different, blurred, like a painted backdrop in an old movie. I looked around, hoping to see a transit sign, but there was nothing. No advertisements, no electronic display showing the next stop. Just a small faded placard above the driver's seat. Route 23, last ride. My stomach twisted. That wasn't right. The M23 didn't have a sign like that. I leaned forward to get a glimpse of the driver, but all I could see was the back of his hat, an old-fashioned cap, like the kind drivers wore in the 1950s. Something was very wrong. I turned to the man sitting next to me, an elderly gentleman with a gray overcoat and round glasses. "Excuse me, where is this bus headed?" I whispered. His face turned slowly toward me, his expression void of any emotion. When he opened his mouth, the words that came out were garbled, as if spoken underwater. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. My pulse quickened. I needed to get off this bus. I stood up and made my way to the back door, gripping the pole for balance as the bus jolted forward. The passengers' heads turned in unison, all their pale eyes locked onto me. My breathing hitched. I pressed the button to request a stop. Nothing happened. I pressed it again. Still nothing. The bus picked up speed. "Let me off," I called, my voice shaky. The driver didn't respond. I turned back to the passengers, their faces blank, empty. watching. The windows had fogged up, but beyond them I could see flickers of something outside. Figures, blurred shadows running alongside the bus, their faces indistinct, but moving in unnatural jerks, too fast to be human. I ran to the front. "Let me off." I banged on the plexiglass, separating me from the driver. His hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white, his posture rigid. He turned his head slightly, just enough for me to see his profile in the dim light. And that's when I saw it. His face was rotted, half-decayed, his cheekbone exposed beneath torn flesh. His lips were peeled back in a gruesome, permanent grin, and his eyes, hollow black pits that stared ahead, unblinking. A scream caught in my throat. The bus lurched violently. I lost my footing and fell to the floor, my hands slamming against something cold and wet. I looked down. The floor wasn't metal anymore. It was wooden, old, rotting, slick with moisture. I scrambled to my feet, looking around wildly. The fluorescent lights above flickered out one by one, plunging the bus into near darkness. I could hear the breathing now. Low, rattling breaths coming from all around me. The passengers were whispering, their voices overlapping, unintelligible murmurs rising like a wave. My body trembled as I stumbled to the door, yanking at the handle. It wouldn't budge. Outside, the world had changed. The city was gone. In its place was nothing but thick fog, swirling around the bus like a living thing. Shadows moved within it, figures pressing against the glass, their hands smearing the windows as they reached for me. The bus jerked again, the engine groaning like it was dying, and then just as suddenly as it had appeared, the door creaked open. I didn't hesitate. I threw myself out onto the pavement, landing hard on my hands and knees. The moment I hit the ground, the sound of the engine roared behind me. I looked up just in time to see the bus pull away, its form growing more and more translucent until it faded completely into the fog. I was back on 9th Avenue. The city was normal again. The streetlights glowed, cars passed by, oblivious to what had just happened. My hands were shaking as I stood up, looking around, gasping for breath. Then my eyes fell on the transit sign above the stop. The schedule was old, yellowed, the paper fragile with age, and at the very bottom, faded and nearly illegible, were the words, Route 23, last ride, discontinued, October 31st, 1957. I never took the bus again. Story 4. The Watcher in the Alley. I used to take the late-night bus home every evening after my shift at a small diner on the Lower East Side. The bus stop wasn't much, just a faded bench under a flickering streetlight, right next to a narrow alleyway that always seemed darker than it should be. Even on nights when the city was alive with honking cars and distant chatter, that alley felt wrong. At first, I ignored it. Everyone in New York knows better than to poke their nose where it doesn't belong. But after a few weeks, I started noticing something or someone in that alley. A shadow that didn't move like the others. A presence that seemed to be watching. One night, when the streets were nearly empty, I caught a clearer glimpse. A tall figure, standing just at the edge of the alley's darkness. He wasn't moving, wasn't smoking, wasn't doing anything but watching me. I felt a shiver crawl up my spine, but I told myself it was just a homeless man or some guy waiting for someone. But then I realized I had seen him before. Every night, always at the same spot, always at the same distance. I stopped looking after that. I'd keep my head down, scrolling through my phone, pretending I didn't notice. But that feeling of being watched never left me. One night, curiosity, or maybe something else, got the better of me. I turned to look, expecting the figure to be there, but the alley was empty. I felt a strange relief, thinking maybe I had imagined it all. But then I heard it, a whisper, a breath, so close to my ear that my skin crawled. "You see me?" I spun around, my heart slamming in my chest. No one was there, just the dimly lit alley and the damp pavement. But I knew I hadn't imagined it. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept circling around that alley, that shadowy figure. I decided to do some digging. I searched through old crime reports and local legends, and that's when I found it. Decades ago, that alley had been the hunting ground of a serial killer known only as the Watcher. He never took victims from the streets. He waited, lurking in the shadows, choosing those who lingered too long at the bus stop. One by one, they vanished. Some bodies were found dumped miles away. Others were never found at all. The killings stopped in the 1970s, and no one ever caught him. But some people, mostly the older locals, swore he never really left. I should have stopped going to that bus stop. I should have changed my route. But something about that alley had its hooks in me now. I needed to know if what I saw was real. The next night, I took my bus home like usual. The moment I stepped off, I felt it. That prickling sensation of being watched. My pulse pounded in my ears, but I forced myself to turn and face the alley. He was there, closer this time. I couldn't see his face, just the outline of a tall man, shrouded in the darkness. But I felt his stare boring into me. My body screamed at me to run, to get away, but I couldn't move. Then, ever so slowly, he lifted a hand and pointed at me. A car passed, its headlights flooding the alley for just a second. And in that brief flash of light, I saw him clearly. His face was pale, sunken, like something pulled from a grave. His mouth was twisted into something that almost looked like a grin. But it wasn't. It was hunger. The light vanished, and so did he. I ran home that night, locked every door, closed every curtain. But it didn't matter. The feeling of being watched didn't go away. And now, every night, even far from that alley, even when I close my eyes, I see him, waiting, watching. Weeks passed, but the nightmares never stopped. At first, I thought it was paranoia, my mind tricking me. But then things started happening in real life. I'd wake up to find my bedroom window unlocked, though I swore I had latched it. The sensation of being watched didn't fade. It intensified. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard footsteps outside my apartment. Slow, deliberate. They stopped right in front of my door. My breath hitched. I reached for my phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed 911. By the time the police arrived, the hallway was empty. They checked the security footage from the apartment complex. The camera outside my door had glitched, just static and distortion. Then came the worst part. They did find something on the footage from the street-facing camera. Just for a moment, a shadowed figure could be seen standing outside the building, staring up at my window. Tall, still, watching. I moved to a new apartment, changed my number, cut off ties with anyone who knew my old address. But even now, I can't shake the feeling that he's still watching. Because every now and then, no matter where I go, I catch a glimpse of a tall figure just at the edge of the shadows, waiting.